It's on. I'm hearing somebody whistling for the beginning of the service. I thought it was Karen. Good morning, all. We're a little bit late getting started. We were trying to adjust, I shouldn't say we, the people who know what they're doing, we're trying to adjust the temperature. Thank you all for coming. I said earlier I'm glad we called it for inside because it rained on me on the way over. And we've not been too fortunate this year, have we? I think we've only had one outdoor service, right? We've had one, right. So thank you for coming today. As you can see, we do not have piano music because both of our pianists are out of town. So just imagine some beautiful music in your head while we get started in the service. Welcome to this place of peace, justice, and hope. In this Unitarian Universalist congregation, we affirm no matter who you are, whom you love, or where you are on your journey, you are welcome here. For those of you joining us online, we're so glad you're here. Everybody turn around and wave at the camera. We're glad you're here. If you're visiting with us today, we do invite you to sign our visitor's book, which is back at the desk in the living room. And please join us for refreshments after the service. We'd like to get to know you better. If there is coffee, I'm not sure there will be, but grab a green mug if you'd like us to talk to you. If you're visiting and you'd rather we not talk to you, get another kind of mug. I'm Julia Beckman. My pronouns are she and her. Our worship associate today is the wonderful Tony Metters. And tech support, as always, thank goodness, is provided by Jane Schaefer and Alex Dvorak. The Reverend Beth Johnson, our minister, is on vacation today, but she will be back soon. We recognize that individuals of all ages and abilities have different needs. During the service, we have on hand various fidgets and drawing supplies in the living room. If at any point you feel the need for movement, please feel free to get up and grab a fidget and engage in drawing, and you can sit back there if you like that seating. Please do see a greeter for assistance if you need it. May you each know you are welcome in this house of peace and justice, and may our worship this morning inspire you and touch your heart, mind, and spirit. This is going to be interesting. Please join me in our opening and only hymn today, hymn number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Tony?
I'm Tony Metters. My pronouns are he and him. And we want to give a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we in the western suburbs inhabit areas that are the traditional territories of indigenous people. As people trying to live into a more just world, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the history and legacy of colonialism, the harm done to Native peoples, and also work to repair that harm. Our call to worship is a reading from a meditation on spirituality after religions by James Ishmael Ford at the Pacific Unitarian Church, Rancho Palos Verdes, California. In his 1897 book, Following the Equator, Clemens writes, "In Sydney, I had a large dream, and in the course of talking, I told it to a missionary from India who was on his way to visit some relatives in New Zealand. I dreamed that the visible universe is the physical person of God, and the vast worlds that we see twinkling millions of miles apart in the fields of space are the blood corpuscles in his veins, and that we and other creatures are the microbes that charge with multitudinous life in the corpuscles." In short, Twain is saying he dreamt. He felt from somewhere deep within that universe is God, and we are the life force of God. And notice, not merely a dream, he called it his large dream. Let us worship together. So please join me in these chalice lighting words. I'm going to work with some.
You have the words, and you should have been
I'll
given
let you
some paper.
read and I'll light.
All right, thank you. I can't do that lighter. He has to do it. Please join us. May this chalice bring us to the precipice of truth, where nothing can be hidden from the flame, and may we find the reckoning place where our souls burst open and into the liberating light. Thank you. Thanks, Tony. There's always a lot going on around the church, as you know, and you can read all about it in News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday. And there are printed copies available I believe at the desk in the living room. If you would like to receive news, News and Notes, please stop at the welcome desk in the living room and give us your email. We'd be glad to have you receive those. Now here's a brief biography of Mark Twain. I'm so glad that you're here to hear all about him. He's one of my very favorites. I'm sure he is yours too. And what an interesting life he had. He was born in the tiny town of Florida, Missouri in 1835, and he died in his beautiful large home in Connecticut in 1910. The family moved a few miles down the road to Hannibal, Missouri, because his father was seeking better opportunities. And then his father died. There was a large family. I believe they had 6 children, some of whom died when they were infants. But his father died when Samuel Clemens was 11, leaving the family in poverty. So he left school and was totally self-educated from then on. He never had any more formal schooling. He had very little formal schooling. He went to work at 13 as an apprentice printer to help support the family. He worked for his brother Orion, who was named after the constellation, his older brother who had a newspaper in a town nearby. So he worked with him as a teenager. And then he moved on to New York City. He worked as a printer there, and he worked in DC, and he moved around. And he was still not quite 20 when he was doing all of this. So he was back in the Midwest, and he was down in New Orleans visiting somebody when he was about 20. And he happened to meet a riverboat captain on the Mississippi. And he was so taken by it, and he'd always loved the Mississippi, of course. So he begged the riverboat pilot to train him, and so he did. And so at 21, Twain obtained the best job he ever had, he always said, that of riverboat pilot on the Mississippi. And of course, if you've ever read his book, Life on the Mississippi, it's a great treatment of what it was like, and it shows how much he loved it. It details his adventures on the river. He was very successful at that. I think he would have spent his life doing that, and we would have been poorer for it. But the Civil War ended all river traffic. So then he was sort of thinking, what can I do? Well, his brother Orion, in the meantime, had gotten involved in politics, and he'd helped Abraham Lincoln get work up to the presidency, and he'd done a lot of other things. So his reward was he was made Secretary of the Nevada Territory. So when he got out there, he offered his brother an unpaid job as his assistant. So Samuel got on the stagecoach and he rode out there, and he worked with his brother, but he kind of got tired of working for free. So he tried, there was lots of silver mining going on, of course, in Nevada. So he tried his hand at that, and all the while he was writing and he was sending little snippets to the local newspapers. But he didn't make any money at mining either. So, excuse me, he then began using the name Mark Twain, and most of you probably know why he chose it, because it's a term, it's a phrase from his riverboating days. When a riverboat didn't know quite whether it could make it through the water, they needed to test the depth. Someone would go out and put down a measuring thing, and if it was deep enough, it was 2 feet was deep enough, they would say, oh, Mark Twain. And that's why he chose it. And he also chose it because somebody else had already used the name as a pseudonym, but he didn't think when he was so far out west that this guy back in Missouri wouldn't know about it. So he kept using it. So it was a phrase from his riverboating days. And while he was out there, he wrote his first successful story, The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, which I'm sure some of you have read. The short story, which became a huge success nationally. He became a correspondent then for the Sacramento Union. He was sent to the Sandwich Islands. I didn't know that they are now Hawaii. I always thought it was a different bunch of islands, but it's not. So he was in Hawaii. And back then, he traveled so much around the world when it wasn't that easy to travel. So he was sent to the Sandwich Islands, and he was reporting from there, and it was well received. So then other newspapers, including the New York Times, picked him up, sent him to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And those writings became his book, Innocents Abroad, which is another really entertaining book. He went on to become, obviously, a hugely successful author and world traveler, very popular on the lecture circuit. You can imagine, with that sense of humor, people loved him. Even so, he did go into bankruptcy later in life due to an investment he made in a new, wonderful, he thought, typesetting machine. It was going to be great, but then the linotype machine was invented and was more successful. So he had invested, this is a mind-blowing amount of money, $200,000 in 1885 dollars, and then he lost it all. Oh my goodness. He recovered, but he kind of had to go on the lecture circuit, and he had to keep writing books. Here's a fun fact. He did start a publishing company after all of this happened. And Ulysses S. Grant lived in Connecticut, and you may know that he died of throat cancer because he smoked cigars all his life. And so Mark Twain got to know him, and he knew that Ulysses was working on his autobiography. He knew he was dying, and he wanted it published so that his wife would have some money to live on. And Mark Twain had this publishing company, so he sat by his side and helped Ulysses finish his autobiography. It was his one successful publishing attempt, so at least he did that. A couple of more fun facts. He was close to Harriet Beecher Stowe and the Stowe family. He even built his grand new home next door to the Beechers. One of his other lifelong best friends was the Reverend Joseph Twitchell, a congregational minister who served a Connecticut church for 40 years. And he was also a friend of 2 inventors, Thomas Edison and Tesla. And Edison invented the motion picture machine right about then, and he even went to Twain's house, and there is a recording a filmed recording of Twain in his home. I haven't seen it, but they say it exists. Such is some highlights of the life of Mark Twain. Tony, he's going to give you more.
I have to thank Julie, because when I saw this part, I said, boy, you can't, this is a fun part. Quotes from Mark Twain. Are we ready? Okay. No sinner is ever saved after the first 20 minutes of a sermon. Okay. Man is kind enough when he is not excited by religion. The easy confidence with which I know another man's religion is folly teaches me to suspect that my own is also. Often it does seem such a pity that Noah and his party did not miss the boat. Under certain circumstances, profanity provides a relief denied even to prayer. Go to heaven for the climate, hell for the company. I don't like to commit myself about heaven and hell. You see, I have friends in both places. Okay.
So here are some remarks about Twain and religion. Here's a quote from a Brigham Young instructor. Even the Mormons loved him, I guess. A man named Jeffrey Holland, and he wrote a book called Soul Butter and Hogwash, Mark Twain and Frontier Religion. When discussing Mark Twain's religious attitudes, his biographers have characteristically focused on the last decades of his life, those final frustrating years in which Twain said going to church gave him dysentery. Nevertheless, the early years, the Western years as it were, are crucial to any real understanding of Twain's attitude toward religion, revealing moments of a remarkable religious experience and providing the backdrop against which those last decades, so full of financial strife and personal tragedy, must be seen. It is of that early period, completed before he was 50 years old, that I wish to speak. Twain, Holland tells us, frequently called his religious life Presbyterianism, the faith of his mother's family. But that label became for him a kind of shoebox repository into which he shoved everything from the faith John Knox espoused to the most nebulous sort of Christian belief. Unlike his friend William Dean Howells, who was another wonderful author of the period, William Dean Howells, who worried a great deal about the difference between a Unitarian and a Universalist, Twain did not have a mind turned to fine theological distinctions. But he did have a soul gripped by the Puritan fathers, a grip which relentlessly affected his moods and his metaphors. He named his house cats, rather apocalyptically, are you ready for this? Famine, pestilence, Satan, and sin. Poor cats. It's a good thing they don't know their names. He thought the height of confidence was a Christian with 4 aces. Smugness was a friend waiting for a vacancy in the Trinity, and so on ad infinitum, or for him ad nauseum. Fear, punishment, conscience, duty, the hand of God, death, these were the staples in his moral pantry. And here's another excerpt from a wonderful speech on Mark Twain, which was delivered by a Unitarian layperson and Mark Twain authority, Dwayne Utze, at the Eastland, Maryland Unitarian Church. And I quote, "The friction he felt between his calling as a gospel preacher," because he did say at one point that he was either going to, let's see, how did he say it? He was either going to go to hell or become a preacher. He wasn't sure which. And his disdain for religion appears to be deeply rooted in the liberal and unorthodox religious thought percolating throughout his hometown of Hannibal, Missouri. The Calvinistic Presbyterianism he learned in church as a boy was undermined by a variety of non-traditional religious thinking circulating within the community. In Twain's family alone, there existed an intriguing diversity of religious experience. His father was a freethinker and his uncle a Universalist. In his autobiography, Twain describes his mother as, quote, saying a soft word for the devil himself. Who ever prays for Satan? Nobody does. That's how his mother felt. Her great-grandson characterized her as taking a fancy to anything queer about a religion or theory, while never actually converting to anything. Twain's brother Orion was excommunicated from the Presbyterian Church after denying the Bible's supernatural qualities. He subsequently joined and abandoned a number of other denominations. Their sister Pamela was attracted to East Indian philosophies. So you see, he grew up with that whole variety of things. Here is a rather long excerpt from a long piece that Twain wrote in 1905, possibly in response to the Spanish-American and Philippine-American wars. He and his family thought that this war prayer, which I will read, was so controversial, he required that it be published only after his death. According to one account, his illustrator, Dan Beard, asked him if he would publish it anyway, and Twain replied, "No, I have told the whole truth in that, and only dead men can tell the truth in this world. It can be published after I am dead." Mindful of public reaction, he considered that he had a family to support, and he did not want to be seen as a lunatic or a fanatic. So here are parts of the War Prayer by Mark Twain. It was a time of great and exalting excitement. The country was up in arms, the war was on. In every breast burned the holy fire of patriotism. The drums were beating, the bands playing, the toy pistols popping, the bunched firecrackers hissing and spluttering. On every hand and far down the receding and fading spread of roofs and balconies, a fluttering wilderness of flags flashed in the sun. Daily the young volunteers marched down the wide avenue, gay and fine in their new uniforms, the proud fathers and mothers and sisters and sweethearts cheering them with voices choked with happy emotion as they swung by. Nightly the packed mass meetings listened, panting to patriot oratory, which stirred the deepest deeps of their hearts and which they interrupted at briefest intervals with cyclones of applause, the tears running down their cheeks the while. In the churches, the pastors preached devotion to flag and country and invoked the God of battles, beseeching his aid in our good cause, in outpouring of fervid eloquence which moved every listener. It was indeed a glad and gracious time, and the half-dozen rash spirits who ventured to disapprove of the war and cast a doubt upon its righteousness straightway got such a stern and angry warning that for their personal safety's sake, they quickly shrank out of sight and offended no more in that way. I think there's some of that going on today. I kind of think. Maybe some things never change. Sunday morning came. Next day, the battalions would leave for the front. The church was filled. The volunteers were there, their young faces alight with martial dreams, visions of the stern advance, the gathering momentum, the rushing charge, the flashing sabers, the flight of the foe, the tumult, the enveloping smoke, the fierce pursuit, the surrender. Then home from the war, bronzed heroes welcomed, adored, submerged in golden seas of glory. With the volunteers sat their dear ones, proud, happy, and envied by the neighbors and friends who had no sons and brothers to send forth to the field of honor. There to win for the flag or, failing, die the noblest of noble deaths. The service proceeded. A war chapter from the Old Testament was read. The first prayer was said. It was followed by an organ burst that shook the building, and with one impulse the house rose with glowing eyes and beating hearts and poured out that tremendous invocation, God the all-terrible, thou who ordainest thunder thy clarion and lightning thy sword. Then came the long prayer. None could remember the like of it for passionate pleading and moving and beautiful language. The burden of its supplication was that an ever merciful and benignant Father of us all would watch over our noble young soldiers and aid, comfort, and encourage them in their patriotic work. Bless them, shield them in the day of battle and the hour of peril, bear them in his mighty hand, make them strong and confident, invincible in the bloody onset, help them to crush the foe, grant to them and to their flag and country imperishable honor and glory. An aged stranger entered and moved with slow and noiseless step up the main aisle, his eyes fixed upon the minister, his long body clothed in a robe that reached to his feet, his head bare, his white hair descending in a frothy cataract to his shoulders, his seamy face unnaturally pale, pale even to ghastliness. With all eyes following him and wondering, he made his silent way Without pausing, he ascended to the preacher's side and stood there, waiting. With shut lids, the preacher, unconscious of his presence, continued his moving prayer, and at last finished it with the words uttered in fervent appeal, "Bless our arms, grant us the victory, O Lord our God, Father and protector of our land and flag." The stranger touched his arm, motioned him to step aside, which the startled minister did, and took his place. During some moments, he surveyed the spellbound audience with solemn eyes in which burned an uncanny light. Then, in a deep voice, he said, "I come from the throne, bearing a message from Almighty God." The words smote the house with a shock. If the stranger perceived it, he gave no attention. "He has heard the prayer of his servant, your shepherd, and will grant it, if such shall be your desire, after I, his messenger, shall have explained to you its import. That is to say, its full import. For it is like unto many of the prayers of men, in that it asks for more than he who utters it is aware of, except he pause and think. God's servant and yours has prayed his prayer. Has he paused and taken thought? Is it one prayer? No, it is two, one uttered, the other not. Both have reached the ear of him who heareth all supplications, the spoken and the unspoken. Ponder this, keep it in mind. If you would beseech a blessing upon yourself, beware, lest without intent you invoke a curse upon a neighbor at the same time. If you pray for the blessing of rain upon your crop, which needs it, by that act you are possibly praying for a curse upon some neighbor's crop, which may not need rain and can be injured by it. You have heard your servant's prayer, the uttered part of it. I am commissioned of God to put into words the other part of it, the part which the pastor and also you in your hearts fervently prayed silently. And ignorantly and unthinkingly, God grant that it was so. You heard these words, "Grant us the victory, O Lord our God." That is sufficient. The whole of the uttered prayer is compact into those pregnant words. Elaborations were not necessary. When you have prayed for victory, you have prayed for many unmentioned results which follow victory, must follow it, cannot help but follow it. Upon the listening spirit of God the Father fell also the unspoken part of the prayer. He commandeth me to put it into words. Listen. O Lord our Father, our young patriots, idols of our hearts, go forth to battle, be thou near them. With them in spirit, we also go forth from the sweet peace of our beloved firesides to smite the foe. O Lord our God, help us to tear their soldiers to bloody shreds with our shells. Help us to cover their smiling fields with the pale forms of their patriot dead. Help us to drown the thunder of the guns with the shrieks of their wounded, writhing in pain. Help us to lay waste their humble homes with a hurricane of fire. Help us to wring the hearts of their unoffending widows with unavailing grief. And it goes on and on and on. We ask it in the spirit of love, of him who is the source of love and who is the ever-faithful refuge and friend of all that are sore beset. And seek his aid with humble and contrite hearts. Amen. After a pause, he said to the congregation, "Ye have prayed it. If ye still desire it, speak. The messenger of the Most High waits." And then there was a long pause, and then Twain ends it this way. It was believed afterward that the man was a lunatic because there was no sense in what he said. One of the most serious pieces he's ever done. As you may know, he was a pacifist. Gee, can you tell from that? And he was the myth was that he was a racist. He wasn't because of Huckleberry Finn, but he wasn't. He was just treating Huckleberry the way things were happening in those days. And he was also very much a feminist. So I thought you needed to hear this serious side of him. Now, time for Tony.
We gather each week reminding ourselves of the power and the beauty of community to heal our souls, open our minds, inspire us to action through the love that is at the center of our faith. Our financial contributions to this congregation allow us to continue to live into our vision of the beloved community here and in the wider world. We commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world. Now let there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. Please join me in our offertory words. Hopefully you know them. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together, and is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world. Okay.
Imagine there's some music playing.
You play our song again. All right. Mark Twain and religion. This is a quote from the reviewer of a book. There is no humor in heaven, Mark Twain and religious liberalism, by Dwayne Utze, the Mark Twain scholar and Unitarian whom we quoted earlier. In There Is No Humor in Heaven, Dwayne Utze challenges the persistent view of Twain as a hostile critic of religion by placing him within the prevailing liberal religious ethos of his time. From Hannibal to the Western frontier, and from Hartford to the wider world, Utze contends Twain's vocation as a humorist was rooted in his frustrated youth ambition to become a preacher of the gospel. Throughout his life, his friendships with several influential liberal ministers, each of them espousing various forms of the era's diverse progressive theology, informed not only Twain's evolving religious worldview, but his lecture performances and literary output. There Is No Humor in Heaven traces unconventional theological influence on Twain, ranging from African American spirituality, Freemasonry, the frontier Unitarianism, to devout liberal Christianity, radical free religion, and esoteric Hinduism. Drawing from Twain's writings, documents, personal notes, and more, There Is No Humor in Heaven offers readers a radical re-examination of the spirituality, creative vitality of a controversial literary giant.
Thanks, Tony. In addition to what we've put together, Susan Hebel sent me a wonderful experience of hers. She couldn't be here today. She's watching. I hope I do it justice, Susan. She said that at the Quincy Church, about 10 to 15 years ago, there was a member who made his living as Mark Twain. Quincy is just 20 minutes from Hannibal. He looked like Twain, dressed like Twain in a white linen suit with a white felt or straw hat, and stayed in character all the time, she says in italics, in bold light. At church, including at social events, he would be Mark Twain. Susan says, I'm not sure when he stopped attending the church, but he certainly added a fun dimension to the congregation. He spoke as Twain. It was actually quite unsettling to try to have a conversation with him. As I recall, he worked as Twain in Hannibal, which is a big Twain tourist destination, and he also did performances all over the country for events like An Evening with Mark Twain. Somehow he found the little Quincy Unitarian Church and was a member for a few years. He signed the book with his real name, I hope, she says. I used to have a photo of him, but who knows where that is, but I thought that was wonderful. And I thought there might be, because this is a shorter service, there might be some of you who have some thoughts about Mark Twain, and I'd love to have you share them with us at this time. Tony will bring the mic around, or if you can come forward, if you can think about it. I know I've read so many of his books over the years. There's someone in the back.
Huckleberry Finn was among the curriculum years for me as a teacher. And the one thing, I haven't read it in like 30 years, but the one part of it that I remember, it's about 3/4 of the way through the book, and Huck and Jim have been on the run, and Huck knows that he's supposed to turn Jim in, and he sits by the river and he tries to pray about it, and he finally says, "You can't pray a lie," and he decides not to turn Jim in.
Oh, great.
In 1996, we bought our camper van, and our first trip was down the Mississippi River. We were New Orleans, but I think we were on our way to see our daughter in Arizona. So we listened to Life on the Mississippi River. We drove. It was just an absolutely fabulous experience. If you haven't read,
Has anyone been to Hannibal, Missouri? Yeah, it's, so as Julia mentioned, if you've ever seen it, it's total, Mark Twain souvenirs, but it's a charming little town right on the river. And so I've been there, and it's fun really to see, where this man came from and lived a lot of his life.
I'm actually going to turn around because most people are back here. I have not read Huckleberry Finn since high school, and recently, or maybe a year or two ago, there was a New York Times bestseller, James. The author was Percival Everett, thank you. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to read that book, but in order to really get in the spirit of things, I'm going to go back and read Huckleberry Finn first. And I have to admit, I had a really hard time getting through it. I got the original version, and it just, the N-word this, the N-word that, it was just hard. So I finally gave it up and I read James, which is the story of the slave Jim from his own perspective. It was so moving, and just hearing more about Mark Twain, I'd like to think that's something he would have written if he'd been able to do it at that time, because James was an educated, intelligent, intellectual, thoughtful, spiritual, grounded person. So I don't really have a point, but that was it. Well, the point is, I think Mark Twain would have written that if he could have gotten away with it at that time.
And you're telling us we should read the book.
Oh.
So on July 2nd, I took the train downtown, first time in almost a year, and I decided to bring along what I would make my summer read, Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I started, and I went back to the art museum 2 days later, and there's a new sculpture there, sort of controversial. It's Jim and Huck, I think is his title, and once you see it, it's two gentlemen nude, and it's made of metal, and it's interpreted. It's on the internet. You can find commentary on it. It's pretty amazing. They have it there, and then just an interesting coincidence. So.
I have the book, James, if anyone wants to borrow it. I love the book. I don't buy many books, but I love that book, and I only buy the books I really love. And I've loved it so much, I recommended it to my book club, and we're reading it in September. So you're all welcome.
Thank you. Anyone?
Hi. Back in the day, like a long time ago, I found in the library one of those Wit and Wisdom, although I don't think it was that one. It was a big, thick book of Mark Twain's writings, his essays and whatnot. And I already told this to Julia, that I would just laugh and laugh as I was reading this thing. And I'd call my kids in the kitchen where I was reading, "Oh, you got it." Of course, they didn't care, you know. But I kept doing it as I was laughing, like, I need to share this with them. And then the other thing was that I was going to Europe with my daughter, and we were going to take a lot of trains, and the one book I brought with was Huckleberry Finn.
Yes, you are. I used to live in Cincinnati, but I'm actually from Chicago, and I'm very, very happy to be back here. And my favorite Mark Twain quote, which is a little bit inaccurate, but he used to say, "At the end of the world, I want to be in Cincinnati because it's 10 years behind every place else." And truthfully, it's more than 10 years behind everyone else, if we're going to be honest about it.
Something I wanted to add about the end of his life. He was poor because of his terrible investments. It wasn't really the end of his life, but they were living in this grand house in Connecticut, and his wife was ill, so they decided to go to live in Europe. You could live there cheaper than in the United States. It might still be true, I don't know, but so they were there for 2 years, and his unfortunately, one of the sadnesses was one of his daughters died while they were abroad, and they weren't here for her. And then he came back, and then to really earn more money, he went on a world speaking tour, and he was gone for a year. And people all over the world knew about him and would go to his lectures. And I don't know how he did in countries that didn't speak English, because I don't think he spoke other languages, but he was quite a remarkable man and lived a wonderful long life. And so with that, we will extinguish our chalice. And if you'll do that. Please say these words with us. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
And the chalice extinguished itself.
Oh, well, Mark is here. I know he is. He's here. And our last statement is from Mark Twain. Let us endeavor so to live so that when we come to die, even the undertaker will be sorry. Our service is over. Let's go out into the world and do our best after we've had our coffee. Please join us downstairs. Thanks for coming.